Next on Arizona 360, challenges encountered by pollsters ahead of Election Day.
As an industry, we have come a long way in Arizona and across the nation.
As more troops prepare to deploy, understanding their role at the border.
They cannot engage in law enforcement functions.
And calls for civility as the nation comes to terms with another mass shooting.
We're talking about what does it mean to take responsibility as a citizen.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. As with any election, candidates, the media, and the public have relied on polls to know which races are close during the midterm. They are a crucial component, and pollsters know they face added scrutiny after the 2016 presidential election when so many predicted a loss for then candidate Donald Trump. We learned how the experience changed their approach from Mike Noble and George Kaloff with the polling group's OH Predictive Insights and Data Orbital in Phoenix. Our discussion began with who gets polled in the first place. In living rooms all across Arizona watching you two, they're going to say, I've never gotten a call, nor do I know someone who's gotten a call, so are they really polling legitimate voters out there? What's your response to that?
I think it's interesting is that, so you have the sample, you randomize it, and typically everyone has the opportunity to get it, but of course you only need to get a small amount of people compared to the overall amount in order to get your number. And so you get that feedback a lot, but again, I just think that you ask the right questions, the right people with the right makeup, you're going to be able to basically predict it or get an accurate pulse on it.
And it also helps, right? If you have a cell phone and if the number on the file is a cell phone versus a landline, we need cell phones in larger quantities nowadays, and we need landlines, and so that's going to increase your likelihood of getting polled. And if you're part of a demographic subgroup that is uncommon, for example, if you're in a year like this, if you're a female Republican under the age of 30, you're more likely to get called than a white Republican male above the age of 55.
Fair to say pollsters like yourselves took a lot of heat after the presidential election. Moving into the midterms, have you changed your game because you took some flack for not knowing what was coming on election day?
Yeah, I think we had to. I mean, look, it was very clear that something was broken after the 2016 election, and that thing specific to that year was the way that pollsters controlled for your education level. And so a lot of the polls in the Midwest underrepresented white high school graduate voters, and they had them about 1%, 2%, 3% less depending on the state: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, and that affected the results. And again, a presidential race is a very intricate balance between the popular vote and the electoral vote that had it shake out. And so as it applies to Arizona, we had to see, okay, what are the biggest factors that are going to determine this year? Gender was a big deal, and obviously party was a big deal.
In that last election, I think also the way they were conducting surveys, the gold standard everyone was saying was live caller surveys. Well, live caller surveys has been fine, but that's what all the folks that have kind of been running polling for a long time compared to, they all missed it compared to online, who basically nailed it because I think it takes out some of that bias because there was about 4% every poll that were undecided. And those folks actually, I believe, had their mind made up, but they just didn't want to tell another human being that they were voting for Donald Trump and ultimately missed it. So I just think there's a lot of adapting going on because of the way and the technology and how we're using it, of how we go and get that sample and get an accurate on an answer. Because what someone tells you person to person compared to online is I think the online is more of the truer look at it, which you may like or not like.
What kind of questions are you asking people? Point blank, do you like Donald Trump or not?
Yeah, we ask favorability, favorable, unfavorable view. We ask them if the election were held today, how would you vote? We ask things that are what we call baseline questions that are consistent, which is state, direction of the state, right track, wrong track, Donald Trump, the governor, things that we know aren't going to have tons of fluctuation, and then we layer in other stuff.
Just because you don't agree with the numbers doesn't mean they're wrong. And we've had, give you a good case in point. So last election cycle, we were one of the first ones to put out Trump was up big in Arizona, and everyone was in a 16-way primary. They're like, there's no way he's up by that much. Usually it's, everyone's kind of clumped together. And of course, everyone came in, he won. We nailed that, and everyone, even Trump's campaign sent a press release out, email with our press release, header, all that stuff. People, MAGA, all that stuff, the greatest thing. And then fast forward a year later, Trump's numbers not doing as well. and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this liberal pollster, and I'm like, you guys were just cheering me a year ago, and now, now I'm, not good. And so I think it's interesting is that we're seeing now at a time is that they want numbers to agree with, and it's just, again, we don't get to control how the numbers come out. When the numbers come out, we have to interpret it good, bad, or indifferent, and again, what you glean from it, because it's a snapshot in time, whether you're ahead or behind, what can you do to change that course?
Are both of you feeling like you have to regain trust moving into this election?
As an industry, we have come a long way in Arizona and across the nation to say, like, look, if polling is done well, it is accurate, this is how it's done well, but we're not the full part of the spectrum. The other component here are the people that consume our polls, and the people that consume our polls, folks and average everyday Americans, consume it through one channel, which is social media, which has a tendency to not be the best promoter of good numbers, just whatever number suits the person that's promoting it, but it's the media. And the media in Arizona, I want to give everyone credit, has come a long way in terms of reporting on polling accurately and talking about different turnout models and extremely scientific, wonky stuff, which we like. But the average American's like, I don't know what this means, but it matters to you. It matters that the NBC Mayor's poll says this, and it matters that that Orbital poll says that, and the OH predictive poll says this. All of that stuff matters, and you have to interpret the results through that.
I get the question a lot, well, how do you know? I'm like, honestly, do you trust their numbers? Have they been accurate in the past? Are they giving you an accurate view? If you could say yes, then yeah, but if not, if they've been kind of all over the boards, or if you think that, not a good track record, that's where, again, so that's where I think you're really separating the wheat from the chaff.
Okay, my thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Now I return to our occasional series, In Their Own Words, where we hear from Arizonans about issues important to them. This week we visited early voting sites in Tucson and asked voters why they believe casting a ballot makes a difference.
So many people in our world don't have the opportunity to vote.
It is a privilege and a responsibility.
If we don't vote, then we have no reason to complain when something happens that we don't like.
But whether your party wins or loses, at least you've made your vote, you've made your decision, you made your contribution.
I just don't like the way our country is going right now. So, in my opinion, there's never been a more important time to vote.
The rift between us as a nation increases every day.
And divisiveness may continue, but we have to do our part.
The fact that we live in a democracy where we can have some say in our government, I think, is extremely important. And so to not take advantage of that, I think, is a waste of one of the most important rights you have.
I think that the youth of our nation are our future. We need to make sure that we're encouraging them to take a stance.
I was talking with my daughter, my 13-year-old, yesterday about voting and how my grandmother told me she never voted. She died at the age of 97, and she never voted because her husband told her that her vote wouldn't count.
Don't listen to people saying, I may as well not vote because it's not going to matter. It really does matter, and especially in smaller elections.
I live here, I go to school here, I breathe the air here, and this state, not just this country, should represent the things that I think about and that I believe in.
I'm happy to see a large turnout this time, and I hope it's record-setting.
This is our best opportunity to give our opinions and our beliefs.
It is a way to make your voice heard when often you are not going to be heard any other way.
So I want my voice to be heard.
If I don't vote, then how is my voice going to be heard?
It is my voice.
Having a voice makes a difference.
Everyone should vote.
Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. It's too late to mail back early ballots. Instead, drop them off at the recorder's office or a polling place in your county. We'll cover the results on PBS 6, NPR 89.1, and online at news.azpm.org. More troops are expected to arrive at the Southwest in the coming weeks. President Trump said the military will deploy more than 5,200 active duty troops in response to a caravan of immigrants from Central America, slowly making its way to the U.S. to seek asylum. It follows a smaller deployment of National Guard troops that began in the spring, and they're expected to support federal agents in similar ways. For a deeper understanding of the scope of their roles, we are joined by Ed Balaban, a former public affairs officer for the Arizona National Guard. He served during Operation Jumpstart, which deployed 6,000 troops to the border between 2006 and 2008. Ed now joins us via Skype from Oswego, New York. Ed, thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome, Lorraine. Good to see you again.
Likewise. Ed, tell me a bit about the training that the Guard troops had to endure before they were actually in place along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Well, regardless of what Guard unit somebody came from, everybody went through anywhere from 3 to 5 days training minimally that dealt with rules of engagement, which was critical, dealt with operational security, dealt with the public affairs aspects, dealt with just the nature of what they would be doing in terms of supporting. Whenever the military has been called out to the border, essentially it was to plus up Border Patrol, who has the legal responsibility of protecting the border. So in order to put more Border Patrol agents forward, the Guardsmen and I guess with the active duty troops being called out, they would be called in to fill in the void where Border Patrol agents would search forward.
It's very clear the American military cannot perform law enforcement functions, and based on your experience, that point was made to the Guard troops, that they were acting only in a support role along the border.
And it's one of the first things that everyone's told. You're not there to, you are not there to stand shoulder to shoulder and prevent anybody from coming in. That's Border Patrol's job. You are there to support Border Patrol.
Ed, were there any rules of engagement that in the event of something terrible taking place where Guard troops had to not ignore, but had to act in a different capacity, just given that the circumstances could be so fluid on any given day?
They're not specific. They can't be because nobody can plan for possibly every contingency. But the bottom line is, you know, life takes precedence. We have to protect the border. If it's a life and death situation, you're going to try and save a person's life if it comes to that. And, you know, certainly nobody wants to shoot. I can recall one incident when I was there. We had the entry identification teams on hilltops along the border, stretched out for miles. And one EIT group saw motion at night. And they could tell by the motion that these people had military training. And essentially it was a group of people that were heading back south towards Mexico. And these guys came within 20 or 30 feet with each other, armed, long guns, rifles. Both people kept their heads on straight and kept their rifles down. Shots were never fired. And then we just allowed these people to head south. They weren't coming in they weren't headed north. And the reports were made from the Guardsmen who were there back to Border Patrol, for Border Patrol to come out as soon as possible to interdict. That was as close as we ever came during Operation Jumpstart. Like I said, fortunately, there were no shots fired. That would have amped up the situation beyond measure.
Ed, I know this was 10 to 12 years ago, and the reason I've met you is you were the public affairs person, so I often received your press releases and information about the duties and the tasks that were being performed by the Guard. Can you provide any insight into the type of individuals that the Guard troops often encountered while working alongside Border Patrol agents?
The number of Guardsmen who actually had contact with people coming over was minimal. Border Patrol would usually have first contact. But I can tell you that having been at the centers in Nogales and Douglas and literally all along the border, it ran the gamut. There were a lot of folks, many who were other than Mexican, who were just looking for a better life, and I don't think anybody faults them. But at the same time, there were a fair percentage, at least 10 to 15% sometimes, who, when they would run the security checks on them through the FBI computers, these people had outstanding warrants on them for virtually every crime known to man. And I'm not being, this is no hyperbole. Rapists, I remember being on site when somebody popped and there was an extradition order on this guy to go back to New York because he blew away a cop. You've got a fair amount of undesirables that will normally filter through like that.
Was this beneficial to the Guard working alongside federal agents along the U.S.-Mexico border?
Absolutely. Keep in mind that Guardsmen are dual-hatted. They answer initially to the governor of all 54 states and territories, and when needed, they are federalized by the president, and then they answer on the federal side. So to work hand in glove with Border Patrol and ICE and other federal agencies for a mission that is key to the security of the homeland. It was very beneficial. I know many guardsmen, when the mission ended, actually applied to be Border Patrol agents.
On the issue of illegal immigration, recently President Trump tweeted about shutting down the southern border in response to the approaching caravan. Whether or not he has the authority to do so, we turn to Christine Husky, who teaches law of armed conflict and national security at the James E. Rogers College of Law at the University of Arizona. When the president tweets, "I will call up the U.S. military and close our southern border," legally, can he?
I think he can legally close the ports of entry to people coming in.
Can he place military between ports of entry as a presence there to say, this is stopped and closed, you cannot enter?
I think he cannot use the military to enforce the law and engage in a law enforcement function, such as standing there and being the wall themselves, and then perhaps engaging in physical activity, whether it's shooting people or something else. That would be a law enforcement function, much like a sheriff or police would do.
The President of the United States also functions as Commander-in-Chief, so he can activate the U.S. military in this case. That's correct?
He can absolutely activate the U.S. troops, military troops.
When we have military troops on the border, can they function in the capacity of what we think of right now, Border Patrol, U.S. Customs, ICE officers, etc., law enforcement?
Well, so they cannot. They cannot engage in law enforcement functions, and there's a 1878 Act that prohibits that. Basically, our U.S. military troops from engaging in domestic law enforcement in the U.S. And by law enforcement functions, we mean things like apprehension, arrest, search and seizure, interrogation, and detention. And that is what we have CBP doing at the border. So U.S. troops cannot do that directly.
When you're Commander-in-Chief and you have word and intelligence that tells you there are thousands of people from a foreign nation approaching your border, for some it may seem reasonable to have that national defense present and visible on the border. Is that accurate?
I think that it does seem reasonable when you phrase it that way. Of course, there are thousands, although the number is dwindling, of foreign nationals coming to the U.S., but they are not coming to invade the country in the legal sense of the word. They're not coming to undermine the authority of the United States. In fact, they're coming for the protection of the United States. They very much want the authority of the United States to protect them.
You've mentioned this word a couple times now. Let's clarify then the meaning of invasion, because it has been used rather loosely perhaps throughout these last few weeks. What exactly is an invasion?
Well, if you actually look it up in the dictionary, it really means an armed group. It could be a military force of another country, or it could be a loose militia, a non-state armed group, which comes into a country or tries to come into a country to undermine the authority of that country, or to overthrow the government, or to change their laws.
Recently, Yuma Sector Border Patrol provided night vision video of their border. You could see dozens of people just hopping over the fence into the United States, which is common. However, it's happened much more frequently lately, and the numbers have increased. As we know, there's been a sudden influx. Doesn't that do enough for a Commander-in-Chief to say something is happening down there, I must do what I have to do to stop that presence? Just the physical act of jumping over the border as opposed to applying for asylum or standing at the port of entry and making that request?
I believe the language really goes to undermining the authority of the United States. So you could read it. I know, again, you're going to hear more about this, and people will be parsing this language. When it's an unlawful obstruction that's against the authority of the United States, or an assemblage that's against the authority of the United States, or a rebellion against the authority of the United States. So it goes back to troops can be used to repel not just an invasion, but an assemblage. Now, this, of course, is an old act, so of course the language is antiquated. But assemblage is, a group of people, right?
And it still applies, though. This is a group of people.
This is a group of people, but they are not coming to go against the authority of the United States.
Candidates are also reacting to the Caravan at the center of this discussion. Here's what U.S. Senate candidate Martha McSally had to say last month during a campaign event in Tucson.
Well, look, this caravan is just an indication of the loopholes in our law that need to be closed and that our border is not secure. Every single day, little mini caravans are coming across, taking advantage of the fact that they know that if they're an unaccompanied minor, we cannot return them immediately unless they're from Mexico or Canada. That if it's an adult with a kid, that they'll be released into the interior of the United States. Last month alone, it was 16,500 people that are in family units that have been released into the interior of the United States. It's overwhelming. Cities like Yuma, which we'll be visiting in the next few days. This is not okay. I think most people, regardless of their political party, will realize that it's not okay that thousands of people that we have no idea who they are can just show up and demand that they can come into the country while millions of people are waiting in line to do it legally.
We would have preferred to get her latest thoughts on that issue, among others. However, she declined several requests for a sit-down interview, similar to the one we did with her opponent, Kirsten Sinema. Communities nationwide are mourning with Pittsburgh after a gunman killed 11 people at a synagogue in a hate crime. Mass shootings resonate here. Every January 8th, we pause to remember the 6 lives taken by a shooter at an event hosted by former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords 7 years ago. That tragedy gave rise to the National Institute for Civil Discourse. Executive Director Carolyn Lukensmeyer joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Carolyn, thanks so much for your time today.
And thanks for having me.
Nearly 10 years with the Institute, we've continued to see violence and disagreements. How has the Institute measured its success in recent years?
When you're looking at the situation we're in the country and the way in which incivility and disrespect has almost become like a virus in our culture beyond our politics, it's very difficult to track all of the elements that you want to track. But we have 2 very specific ways. We do a tremendous amount of work with state legislators across the country. Nearly 775 of them have gone through a process in experiential learning that we call building trust through civil discourse. So in each of the 16 states where we've done that work, we tracked its impact by, more bipartisan legislation passing? Is there more informal contact between members across the aisle? It's more challenging when you're working with the public, because we're organizing events, particularly in 4 states we've chosen to go quite deep: Maine, Ohio, Iowa, and of course Arizona. And there we're bringing together the public. Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's small groups, sometimes it's a whole church. So having access to those people to track how their behavior changes after we work with them is much more difficult than it is in the context of a legislative organization.
When people think of the word civility, what should they be thinking of?
So when I first took this position, I actually looked up the etiology of the word. It turns out it's a French word. It comes from a French word in the 1300s, and what it really means is the duties and responsibilities of a citizen. So when we work with people, we say, no, we're not talking about manners. We're not talking about being nice. We're talking about what does it mean to take responsibility as a citizen, to follow on the pattern that was set out for us by our founders, to aspire to being a democracy that is inclusive and just for all.
You've spoken on politics. It seems there's a lot of attention given to the president and his communication style, political leaders. The average American probably consumes more media through the local news, late night television, the radio station. The Institute holding those entities as responsible as we are political leaders?
It's very difficult for us as one organization to be tracking the way you'd have to track this nationwide. So we work in a collaboration with organizations to put out something we've called, there's a website your viewers might want to look at, www.revivecivility.org, where we have put up all the kinds of designs and practices that we know will shift this, and where we encourage people like the people you just mentioned that know they should take a different level of responsibility about what's happening. Americans aren't talking to each other or listening to each other in the way that has been the pattern in our culture. And it's going to take all of us to change that. 75 to 80% of us, we know that where we're stuck at the moment in not respecting each other enough to even be able to talk to each other is really wrong and want to do something about it.
Carolyn, when we hear the president say something, when we hear a late night comedian or a very successful actor, actress, musician make a comment and their competing interest, it somehow legitimizes what people at home are hearing and listening because someone has already said it and done it.
There's no doubt. We as human beings are social beings. We model ourselves after what we see. When we're working in communities, we actually have heard people say to us, well, President Trump says that, why can't I? Or Trevor Noah says that, why can't I? So this issue of it's not a direct A-B cause and effect relationship, but what has happened over the last 4 years is that bigoted, misogynist, otherizing, demonizing language has once again in the public arena been made legitimate for anyone who has that kind of feeling, however buried it may have been. Something that is fascinating and we haven't spoken enough about is that since we do model after people who are powerful in our lives, some research just came out from a researcher named Jamil Zakir at Stanford University, where he's taken and repeated some of the older research on the negative side, but he's also discovered that this kind of modeling and legitimating and encouraging works on the caring kindness side. Wouldn't it be something if all of us in our circles of influence stepped up and started making civility, respect, caring, and kindness? Let's start that contagion.
Before we go, we want to share a few more comments from the same voters we heard from earlier about division and what it means to be civil.
Yes, civility is missing these days.
I'm especially heartbroken about what's going on. Immediately in our country, people are being killed in churches. The hatred is spreading rampantly.
I mean, it just comes down to the ability to compromise.
So I think civility to me is respecting the rights that everyone has as human beings, not only their rights like free speech, but also their rights to be respected.
Treating each other with humanity.
Do you respect the other citizens who are working in this country to make it a better place and living in this country and want it to be the best place that it can be?
I'm of a generation I was taught to say please and thank you and to try and really look at people on the other side and not just condemn them out of hand. And I feel like that's happening. I find myself doing it. And then I try and back up and change that within myself and hope that other people will do the same. What she said.
And that's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To get a look at next week's program, visit us on social media and let us know what you think. And remember to vote this Tuesday. We'll see you next week.